Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Gina. This is Lavender and Lunge. Today we're going to be going over a how-to video for downward facing dog, or in Sanskrit, ADHO MUKHA SVANASANA. So it's also Halloween week, so anybody that celebrates Halloween out there, happy Halloween. I'm just going to add a bunch of little Halloween emojis on the screen, and that will kind of liven up our little yoga practice today. So as always, we're going to go over the how, the why, and the modify for downward facing dog. I'm sure you've practiced this at some point before, but today we're going to go over all of those little basics to get into the pose. If you like this video and other videos, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And the only props that you're going to need today is grab 2 yoga blocks if you have them. If not, no worries. Grab a little blanket that you have around the house. And whenever you're ready, I will see you on the mat. All right, so how do we get into ADHO MUKHA SVANASANA or downward facing dog? Easiest way is we're gonna just start off in a tabletop. I feel like we always start off in tabletop. So let's just go ahead, come on into tabletop. Now, ADHO MUKHA SVANASANA is a great pose for, I think, the entire body, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but first let's get into how do we get into it. So from tabletop, we're going to tuck our back toes, and we're just going to send our hips all the way up to the sky. And so you'll see my feet are not able to touch totally, so my heels are off the mat. I'm bending my knees as well, so you can walk your hands out if you feel like you're kind of too close to your feet. And what I like to tell anyone that's practicing down dog is just begin to pedal out the feet. Don't worry about the hips. Don't worry about anything else. This is all about kind of working your way into your downward facing dog. Now we're gonna start with our hands. So coming all the way from our hands and our wrists, you want those fingertips to be pressed into the mat. And we're gonna go all the way up to our shoulders. Draw the shoulders away from the ears. We have a tendency to kind of hunch, and so you kind of wanna draw those shoulders down and back. If you notice that you're externally rotating here, you wanna internally rotate those shoulders too. So elbow creases in, not facing forward. Then making our way down our back and towards our ribs. We want to have soft ribs here, okay? So making sure that if our ribs are kind of sticking out, we want to tuck them in, nice, tight, and strong core. Now we're going to stop there and we're going to make our way towards our feet. So noticing our heels are off the ground, that's totally fine. If you're able to get your heels on the ground, great. If you're not, that's fine too. What you want to pay attention to though is the hips. And so that's why I was kind of doing that pedaling out in the beginning, because we have really tight hamstrings. And so in order to be able to open up those hamstrings, you have to kind of work them out a little bit. So we're pedaling out the feet. The key here in downward facing dog is we're gonna go back into it, starting in our tabletop, pushing ourselves up. You want to eventually draw the hips up to the sky. And the whole point behind this is you are getting a much deeper stretch in your hamstrings and in your glutes. I mean, you'll feel it as you get into the pose. So when you have kind of a collapsed or curved back here, you're really not getting the benefits of this stretch. So go ahead, pedal out the feet, bend the knees as much as you need to, and send those hips up to the sky. And that is going to give you your downward facing dog. So now that we've gone over the how, let's talk about the why. Why do we practice downward facing dog? Well, it is one of many poses that we do in a sun salutation. And for anybody that's like, sun salutation, what is that? We'll go over all of the sun salutations in another how-to video, so stay tuned for those at a later date. But we go through a downward dog in a sun salutation, and we incorporate the breath with the downward dog as well. So in order to be able to stretch out everything essentially from our fingertips all the way up to our shoulders, activating our core, and then we're stretching all the way from our glutes down to our feet, really. You're getting kind of this all over body stretch. And so that is fantastic, especially for any athletes out there, anybody that has those tight hamstrings, because I know we all do. I have really tight hamstrings. And then tight glutes as well. So it really begins to kind of open up those muscles in the body, start to warm them up for other poses that we do in yoga. And so it's wonderful for that. It's also a little bit of a workout, if you've noticed, kind of staying in downward facing dog. It's not always easy. I've had students in classes tell me, you know, when I first started off going into a downward facing dog, it was pretty challenging to be able to stay up in a downward facing dog. But then as you build up that strength and that endurance and that flexibility, then you start to notice that it is a little bit easier and it's a little bit more manageable to stay into that pose for a little bit longer. So it's a wonderful pose, I have heard, for anxiety and stress relief, but that's just yoga in general. So practice it for those reasons. That's kind of the why, but now let's get into the modified. If you are somebody that has wrist injuries, I have a few solutions for you. If you are somebody that kind of struggles with staying up, then again, it's just something that you kind of build up that strength to. And so playing around with it, maybe staying up for a certain amount of time and then going down and then just kind of practicing those intervals. But really the modification here is going to be for anybody that struggles with wrist injury or wrist issues. And I do want to say that if you're practicing this and you are somebody that suffers from migraines and headaches, be very careful practicing this pose. If you are somebody that suffers with those wrist injuries, be very careful. And then there's a few other contraindications that you just kind of want to be careful of. So go ahead and check those out. I'll include those in the description below. But for anybody that has those wrist injuries, here are a few modifications for you. You want to grab that blanket that we talked about at the beginning of the video, and then we're just going to place that blanket at the very front of our mat. And so kind of laying that there, we're going to go back into our tabletop. We're going to place our hands on our blanket, tuck our back toes, and then push ourselves up. Again, pedaling out those feet, sending those hips up, bending those knees as much as we need to. Again, drawing the shoulders away from the ears, and then softening those ribs. Now, what I forgot to mention is your feet can be about hips width distance apart, and your hands are about shoulder width distance apart. And I just like to really go through this kind of alternating between pedaling out the feet and then sending the hips up, because that really begins to warm up those muscles and stretch them out. And so if you notice, if you have any kind of wrist pain or wrist discomfort, maybe adding the blanket is a good option for you. Also, what you can do, like I said, grabbing those two blocks, you can place those blocks where your hands would be. And so let's give that a try. Go ahead, bring those blocks to where your hands would be. We'll go into our tabletop. We'll place our hands on our blocks, so hold on to them nice and tight, tucking our tailbone, or tucking our toes, sending our tailbone up. This is our kind of 2-for-1. So if you feel like the stretch is just a little too intense, these blocks are gonna lessen that intensity. And then it's going to be great for anybody that has that wrist discomfort, because these are pretty soft and you can allow yourself to kind of rest on those soft foamy cushions as opposed to on the hard ground. And so this kind of gives you a little bit of a boost if you feel like, whoa, that was just too much, too intense. And so it gives you a little bit of added height. And so you can just kind of play around with that as well, and we'll just come back down onto the mat. So removing our blocks, those are two options for you, but let's say you're in a yoga studio and you don't have those options. You don't have a blanket, you don't have your blocks with you. You can go to that little trick that my yoga teacher taught me, which is just rolling up that mat, and then you can use that rolled up mat. You have that double thickness there, and you can place your palms on that double thickness, and it works just great. So there you have it, the how, the why, and the modify for downward facing dog. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial or how-to and how to get into Adho Mukha Svanasana, and I have certainly enjoyed teaching it. I hope you have a wonderful Halloween. That's why I'm wearing orange today. So little Halloween, week, some festivities, and I will see you next time for another how-to video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye, y'all.